Okay, cool. So a lot of conversations I've been having at the gym recently, and a few of you who work from home, and obviously like busy corporate jobs. A big topic that's coming up at the minute is burnout and feeling overwhelmed mentally. So I thought it'd be really good to kind of go over and speak about dealing with burnout, some strategies, and what to do if you are in this position. Because it's a very serious thing. It's very like it's probably always been a thing, but it's definitely more recognized. And a lot of businesses and companies are a lot more open to being able to help with this as well. So yeah, let's talk about it. So first of all, like it's really important to understand like what is the actual definition of burnout. So burnout is a state of emotional, mental, and often physical exhaustion brought to you by prolonged or repeated stress. So it's not, you know, something that's built up over a few days or like a week. This is something that's consistently happening in your lifestyle, in your job, um, whatever area of life that it is, like it's a consistent stressor that you kind of can't switch off from, and something that you might not be thinking about at a time, but it's always in the back of the mind, draining your energy. So that's why it's such a big topic, and that's why it's so damaging it for most people because it's something that we can't really control. It's something that's just always there. In simple terms, life feels pretty shit. It feels like you can't escape it. It feels like everything's kind of, you know, we'll go over some of the words here. So, like some of the signs, you're irritable, like feeling detached from yourself, low motivation, brain fog. You're starting to forget things more. You can't focus as much, whether that be at work or at home or whatever activities you do, always feeling fatigued, trouble sleeping, headaches, and all of that combined has an impact on your immunity as well. So maybe you're getting ill more often. Maybe you're feeling a little bit, drowsy, or you're picking up colds, or you have to take more time off work for sickness. And I think that's one of the biggest things for companies, and that's why they're so open to helping people now, is because actually they're spending so much money on sick days and support with sickness that actually it comes a lot of the time from things like burnout and mental stress. So these are some of the signs. So again, like if you can relate to some of this, maybe there's some reflection, and by the end of this you might actually be able to identify that burnout is on the horizon. um, so we're going to talk about some of the causes, and unfortunately, when it comes to like conversations of burnout and help and resources, unfortunately, a lot of it starts from already being burnt out. And obviously, once you've kind of been in that position, you then have some sort of experience or knowledge on how to prevent it in the future. But a lot of kind of what's been done or spoken about is kind of when you're already in that position, unfortunately. But some of the things that will cause that burnout is things like being overcommitted, always trying to take on more, a lack of rest or boundaries, unrealistic expectations for yourself, or like how others perceive you, um, not being aligned with like your values, and then a lack of time management. So you always feel like, there's not enough time to do things, or, there's you feel like you're always falling behind on calendar, or you're not able to hit certain targets. And that's why there's a picture of someone trying to push, a massive rock up a hill, because it always feels like you're never catching up, you're never able to complete anything. And all of these things will build up to that. So if they're the causes, then what can we do to help this? So if you feel like you're on this path or on this journey, the immediate things that you can do, within a short period of time is, take some time off, whether that be like a weekend or a short breakaway. If you have weekends off, then, maybe like a Friday or a Monday, have like a 4 day weekend. Or if it's during the week, you need to do this probably within the next 6 or 8 weeks. If you're feeling really down and low and ill and exhausted, take some time off, just reset, have a nice weekend, get outside, move the body, go for a long walk, have a digital detox, stay away from the computer, try and limit your consumption on the phone. um, some people like a little bit of a break from social media as well. Because although why a technological detox is so important is because, especially if you're someone that works from home, just being on a laptop or being on a phone, your emails might pop up, for example. You're open and you're exposed to that possibility that that same stressor will pop up again, even though you're having time away. So you need to completely dissociate yourself from that stressor and what that thing is, especially if it is work. It just doesn't have to be, but from the conversation that I have, and for most of you that are kind of in this program, it's going to be most relevant talking about work. You got to practice saying no. So I know, like a lot of you want to take on more. You like, you want to achieve stuff, and like it's all well and good, but the problem is that if you get to this stage of burnout, then you end up being knocked back to two spaces, taking time off work or, struggling to see a way forward just because you've been doing all of these extra tasks that actually, unfortunately, and again, like I've been in this position myself, feels like gets recognized, but probably doesn't. And again, like it depends on your workplace or whatnot, but usually those things they like whoever's delegated it or given it to probably won't recognize anyway. They just didn't want to do it, so they're just trying to hand it off to someone else. And unfortunately, if you're the one that's always saying yes and trying to pick up, then you're the one that's gonna be burnt out by the end of it. And usually, in my position or what I've experienced in the past with jobs that I've worked, you won't get the praise for that. And how to help as well is like sleep. So sleep is a massive, massive it's so key. Like I feel like I talk about it a lot, but I can't stress how important sleep is for your management of stress. You know, and sleep is such an important thing because it's not something that's you can't get that night's sleep back. If you've had like a 4 hour sleep, on Monday, and then you've slept for like 12 hours on Tuesday, sleep doesn't work in a way where you gain it back. It doesn't work like that. Once you've lost that sleep, like the damage has already been done. The stress in the body, you haven't recovered properly. Just because you sleep 12 hours the next day doesn't mean that you kind of bring that back. That effect is instant and that effect is, at that time. So having a consistent routine and sleeping on a regular basis is really going to help with that, stress regulation, having a routine, and being able to think more clearly. So moving forward, what we need to do, not yourself, but like as a team, is start to set realistic goals. Start to set non-negotiable downtime. And I'm going to put my hands up, you know, for someone that's talking about burnout and non-negotiable downtime. I'm definitely not the best at that either. I definitely break a lot of my boundaries, which is something that I need to reflect on. And I think it's important for me to put my hands up as well because at the end of the day we are human beings, we're not perfect, and that's something that I need to work on as well. Weekly check-ins with yourself, or have like a list of questions. Ask yourself certain things. Is it you know affirmations, or ask yourself how you're getting on and where you're at each week. Make check in with yourself, or like we do in the program, like we have a check-in. So we do like monthly check-ins, that will ask about your sleep, or ask about your progress, just to see where you're at, and that's an opportunity to talk about it and get some feedback. But again, setting those realistic goals, so then you don't always feel like there's this massive mountain to climb. um, so some tools that you can use as well. So obviously you've got the apps like Notion, Calm, Headspace. They can kind of help you relax and detox at the end of the day. But also there's some really good books as well. So I always talk about Atomic Habits, like one of my favorite books. But there's actually a book called Burnout as well, that some of you might be interested in reading. I haven't read it myself, but I've heard a lot about it, and there's a lot of reviews about it as well. So as I was kind of looking into this topic, that book kept popping up. So that's one that's been added to my reading list, but one that's probably worth reading, based on kind of what's been said about it. So that might be an interesting one for some of you. And a really important thing, like just kind of wrapping up, is like we need to get it straight. Like burnout isn't a weakness. Like if you're in a stage of burnout, or if you feel like you're getting burnout, it's not a weakness. It's just a sign that you need to reassess and rethink about the way that you're doing things. Whether that's a conversation with your company, or your family, or your personal life, whatever's going on, it's just a time to reflect and go, actually, this thing isn't working right now for me at this stage. Maybe it used to, but right now it's not. And unfortunately, it's impacting the way that, I think, I feel, my immunity is very real stuff. So it's just a time to reflect and think about, what's the better way forward. So three things to kind of think about and ask yourself, like, where am I currently overextending? So think about, if you feel like you're on this path to burnout, or you feel, some of the words that we kind of spoke about earlier, just ask yourself, like, where am I currently overextending? Like, where do you feel like most of your time and energy is going? What does rest look like for you? Because rest for me wouldn't look like rest for someone else. For some people, sitting watching TV might be restful. For others, that could still be quite a lot of stress. So maybe it's reading a book, or maybe it's, using things like Calm or Notion, where you can kind of zone out a little bit. And what's one thing that I can let go of this week? And that can be quite hard. And it doesn't have to be something big. But what's one thing that's kind of, that's distracting you or keeping you away from the things that you should be doing? So they're like three questions. Again, if you wanted to kind of do like a weekly reflection for yourself, or journalism, or whatever it is that you works for you, they're three simple questions that you can walk away with and kind of go, I need to reflect on this. So that's dealing with burnout. We'll do a quick recap, but essentially, like, I know that it's a hot topic at the minute. Whether that be, we've just gone through like Christmas rush, we're coming out of, like the winter tough times. Our vitamin D is probably at its all-time low. Well, no, it is by this stage because there hasn't been enough sun to build those stores back up. So, it is a tough time, but we are going into summer, so that usually helps as well. But again, like, just to recap, like, burnout is a state of emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion. Okay, like, this isn't something that happens over 1 or 2 days. This is repeated stress over and over. And life does feel shit, but you need to take action if you want to see change. Otherwise, all that will happen is it will keep building up, and then you'll get to a stage where, it takes real action, whether it be, therapy or GP or, stuff like that. Try and avoid burnout. It is hard. There's some tools there, you know, try and set realistic goals, try and, you know, have some detox, like look after yourself, plan time off, you know, in advance. I know there's one or two of you in the program. I'm jealous. Like your time planning is like amazing. Like you've already planned like all your holidays and time off for the year based on like how you work. It's incredible. So like if you've got a certain amount of holiday, think about the year. Think about, do you have like a weekend, or do you have, yeah, like even something as simple as that. Like, do you have a weekend off every month? Or do you have like a 4 day weekend off every 3 months or whatever? Like, plan that holiday, or plan that time off, should I say? Just so you can kind of realign with your goals and your values and where you're at. So that's burnout. Hopefully, it helped some of you, or hopefully maybe it brought to light, so for some of you that might not have kind of thought that the way you feel is burnout. Um, but yeah, some things to speak about there. Obviously, if you found it helpful, there's always, the group chat that you can kind of refer to if you learned something, or there was something you didn't know, pop it in the group chat, because it might seem scary like talking or opening up about it, but I promise you, like 70% of you have had conversations with this in the group chat. So, everyone's kind of in the same boat. Hopefully this helped. Obviously, think about those questions and yeah, make sure you action it, because it's all well and good listening to stuff like this, or watching stuff like this, but it always takes action to make that change. If you need anything, obviously you can always drop me a message. But yeah, hopefully this helped and it shed some light. So appreciate you for joining, and I'll wrap this one up.